Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope you're doing well today. You know, in the wilderness, there are many temptations. Jesus knew of them intimately. And we do well to heed the manner in which he resisted their appeal. Okay? After all, we've kind of been cast by a global pandemic into a wilderness, right? A desert place devoid of conventional gatherings, of just being with other people. You know, we can't embrace that embodied fellowship right now. So we find ourselves, in a sense, in a wilderness. We, like perhaps the psalmist of the Hebrew Scriptures, are now asking ourselves, how do we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? And that's kind of where we find ourselves right now. How do we continue to worship and sing and be God's children in this strange time in our lives? It's a question of theology. It's a question that explores really the nature of worship itself and the scope and the limitations of adapting what we do in God's sanctuary and somehow transposing that into today's technology. Thus, one way we're doing is through these daily devotions, right? And Tammy sending you emails every day. The question, I think, is furnished with the same temptations that Jesus confronted in the desert, especially the temptation of the evil one saying to Jesus, just turn the stones into bread and, you will take care of your hunger. There are many ways to interpret this temptation directed towards Jesus. But I want us to consider the view that Jesus' tempter was basically trying to have Jesus forfeit his hunger, get rid of his hunger, right? Just turn the stones into bread. Of course, being hungry is hard, and God does not want any of us to starve. But spiritual hunger, I think, is an essential part of our human makeup. We are created to want to hunger for God. The paradox of the Christian life is that we are spiritually satisfied and fed precisely when we feel a deep hunger for God. So when the tempter told Jesus to turn the stones into bread, he was inviting Jesus to worship really his own stomach, if you will. One way to look at it. To satisfy his hunger with physical bread, rather than pursue God's invitation to satisfy his hunger with even a deeper hunger for God. I mean, we're all hungry right now. Okay? We're hungry for God. We're hungry for each other. We're hungry for the rituals that bind our lives together through the communion of the Holy Spirit. But hunger can make us susceptible to temptation, right? As a scattered church with access to the gift of and wonder of technology, Our greatest temptation is to fill our stomachs with virtual media rather than allowing our hunger to provoke questions about what it means to be human. Don't get me wrong, Zoom and FaceTime are wonderful things to have. They are tremendous resources for the church right now, for the scattered church. And we should be very grateful to have such technology to stay connected with each other. But they are no substitute for our gathering together in worship. If that were so, Zoom church, would have been the norm long before COVID-19. Ambivalence, not contentment, should be our posture right now, the church's posture right now. We would be fools to avoid or shun the gifts of technology during a pandemic. Absolutely. We need to take advantage of it. But the greater tragedy arises, let me think this through. The greater tragedy arises when we become satisfied with technology's quasi-ability to facilitate communion. Being satisfied means losing our hunger for being together in worship. Losing our hunger for embodying our rituals. Losing our hunger for coming together to embrace those physical acts of service and ministry that manifests the church's visibility in the world. We should hunger for that. I've heard people say, well, extreme measures have a strange way of becoming permanent. Zoom church is adequate for right now. Adequate. But we should not allow it to somehow become more desirable, more permanent than the miracle of the physical gathering of the church community. Surely we will not become satisfied with what we have right now, right? I think we underestimate this temptation of being satisfied at our own peril, honestly. Scroll through Facebook and you'll see many pastors scrambling to match the production value of their regular Sunday services and Wednesday night Bible studies. The output is astounding that's being done by churches. Though mentally and emotionally, I don't think it's sustainable. And much of it requires an admirable skill set, which I certainly don't have. But in addition to anxiously competing in a new marketplace of the virtual church service, one wonders if our churches are desperately trying to obscure the loss and satisfy the hunger that we are all feeling now. I feel this temptation. I do. I understand the desire to satisfy our hunger with virtual duplicates of what goes on Sunday morning. I understand trying to satisfy that hunger rather than allow our hunger to cultivate a healthy longing for what we have just temporarily lost. And it is temporary. I want you to stay hungry for fellowship. I want you to stay hungry for each other. I want you to stay hungry for gathering together again someday, and it'll happen. And most of all, I want you to stay hungry for God. Truth is, no matter how savvy our technology or how slick and professional our podcasts or live streaming services can be, that hole in our stomach should probably stay there until we reconvene in our sanctuaries. Which means we should temper our worship expectations for right now and stop trying to do what really is impossible and allow ourselves room to grieve and to lament and to stay hungry. So leave the stones alone. Stop trying to turn them into bread. Your hunger, paradoxically, will fill you up. When our church doors reopen, and they will, and when you finally hug that pew mate of yours again, you'll know exactly what I mean and what I'm talking about. Till then, I feel like that, man on the Dos Equis commercial, stay thirsty, my friends. Stay hungry, my friends. All right? For God, for church, and for each other. And find some things to laugh about and smile. It will help your stress level. Okay? Love you guys. God bless you. And I'm certainly not the most interesting man alive. That I can assure you. Miss you. Love you. Bye-bye.